The idea of camping alone in the deep of winter always held a certain pull for me. It was a challenge, a test of skill and spirit against the raw power of nature. I craved the profound silence that only a snow-covered forest can offer. The world gets so loud sometimes, filled with noise and demands. I needed to escape it all, to reset my mind and find a bit of peace. Packing the truck felt like a ritual, a careful preparation for a mission. Each piece of gear was chosen for a specific purpose. A tool to help me survive and thrive in the cold. It was about more than just a trip. It was about proving to myself that I could be completely self-reliant. My dog, Roscoe, a big German shepherd with a heart full of loyalty, seemed to sense the adventure ahead. He watched my every move as I loaded the heavy-duty tent, the Sub-Zero sleeping bag, and the extra wool blankets. I packed a small axe for firewood and enough food for 3 days. The checklist was long, but winter camping leaves no room for error. Forgetting one small thing could mean the difference between comfort and real danger. I explained to my friends that I needed this time alone, just me and my dog against the elements. They thought I was a bit mad, but they understood the pull of the wild. The desire for solitude was strong. I imagined waking up to a world painted in white, with only the sound of my own breath and the crunch of snow under my boots. It was a romantic notion, a picture of perfect tranquility. I wasn't running from anything, but rather running towards something essential, something real. Modern life can make you feel soft, disconnected from the basic skills of survival. This trip was my way of reconnecting, of feeling the sharp edge of the world again. I felt confident in my abilities and my gear. I was ready for the cold, the snow, and the quiet. Before leaving, I did one last check of everything in the back of the truck. The cooler was full, the water jugs were topped off, and my emergency kit was easily accessible. Roscoe whined with excitement, his tail thumping against the passenger seat, where he would ride. He was my partner in this adventure, my four-legged security system. The thought of being completely alone out there didn't scare me, it excited me. It was the ultimate freedom. Little did I know that this trip would teach me a powerful lesson about the difference between being alone and feeling truly isolated and vulnerable. The wild was calling, and I was ready to answer. The drive began on familiar gray pavement, but soon the city melted away behind me. The roads became smaller, winding their way into the countryside. I watched as the landscape transformed, the green and brown fields slowly giving way to patches of old, stubborn snow. The farther I drove, the thicker the snow became, blanketing the world in a soft white layer. The truck's tires hummed on the asphalt, a steady sound that was soon replaced by the crunch of snow and ice as I turned onto the unpaved Forest Service roads. This was where the real journey began, where civilization was left behind. The trees grew taller and denser, their branches heavy with fresh powder. It was like driving through a tunnel of white. The world outside my windows was completely silent, except for the low rumble of the engine. There were no other cars, no other tracks in the snow besides the ones I was now making. This was the isolation I had been seeking. It felt pure and untouched. Roscoe sat quietly in the passenger seat, his head up, his ears alert. He was taking it all in, just like me. The air grew colder, the light softer, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. I found the perfect spot deep within the national forest, a small clearing just off the barely there road. It was exactly as I had pictured it, a secluded pocket of wilderness surrounded by towering pine trees. I turned off the engine, and a profound silence immediately fell over us. It was so quiet it felt heavy, a physical presence. I stepped out of the truck, and the cold air hit my face, sharp and clean. The snow was deep, almost up to my knees in some places. There was not a single sign of another human being, no footprints, no trash, no noise. It was just us, the trees, and the snow. Roscoe jumped out of the truck, his paws sinking into the soft powder. He bounded around the clearing, kicking up clouds of white, a joyful expression on his furry face. His energy was infectious, and I couldn't help but smile. This was it. This was my temporary kingdom, a place of peace and solitude. The setting sun cast long, blue shadows across the snow, painting the landscape in hues of orange and purple. The beauty of it was breathtaking. I took a deep breath of the frigid air, feeling the stress of the world leaving my body. I was finally here, in the heart of the white silence. Setting up camp in the snow is a slow and deliberate process. Every action requires more effort in the cold. First, I used a shovel to clear a large, flat area for the tent. I had to pack down the snow until it was firm, creating a solid foundation. If you set a tent on loose snow, your body heat will melt it overnight, leaving you in a cold, wet puddle. Being prepared for winter camping means knowing these little details. They are not just for comfort, they are for survival. Roscoe watched me work, occasionally nudging my hand with his cold nose as if to offer his help. Once the platform was ready, I unpacked the four-season tent. The poles were cold to the touch, and my fingers, even in gloves, started to feel stiff. I worked quickly and efficiently, a skill honed over many previous, less extreme camping trips. Soon, the sturdy dome tent stood proudly in the clearing, a small bastion of shelter against the vast wilderness. Inside, I laid down an insulated ground pad and unrolled my thick, warm sleeping bag. It already looked inviting. Having a secure and comfortable shelter is the most important part of staying safe in the winter woods. With the tent set up, my next task was to gather firewood. The sun was getting low, and the temperature was dropping fast. I took my small axe and ventured just beyond the clearing. Finding dry wood in a snowy forest is a challenge. I looked for dead branches, still hanging on trees, protected from the moisture on the ground. It was hard work, but necessary. Roscoe stayed close by my side, his presence a silent comfort. He would stop and sniff the air, his ears twitching at every small sound, a loyal guardian in this quiet world. As dusk settled in, I had a respectable pile of wood next to the fire pit I had dug in the snow. I built a small fire, and soon the crackling flames were pushing back the encroaching darkness and the biting cold. The fire was the heart of our camp. I cooked a simple meal of soup and bread, sharing a few bites with Roscoe. We sat together by the fire, watching the flames dance. The warmth felt amazing on my cold face. The forest was peaceful, the air was still, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the clear, dark sky. It was a perfect moment. As full darkness fell, the cold really tightened its grip on the forest. The temperature just plummeted, and honestly, the air became so still it was like the world was holding its breath. The silence out there, it's nothing like what you get in the city. It's this deep, absolute quiet, almost like it's a sound all on its own. Every tiny noise gets magnified. The crackle of the fire, the soft sigh of the wind way up in the branches, the crunch of my boots on the snow, each sound was just so crisp and clear. This profound stillness, well, it's what I'd come for, but I gotta admit, it had a slightly unnerving edge to it. It was making me feel, I don't know, just really small. To stay warm, I had to stick to a strict routine. I dressed in layers, a thermal base, a fleece mid-layer, and then a waterproof outer shell. That system traps your body heat, but still lets moisture escape. Before crawling into my sleeping bag, I'd do some light exercises, just to get my body temperature up. I also filled up a water bottle with hot water from the fire and tossed it down at the bottom of my sleeping bag, a simple trick for a long-lasting source of warmth. These little preparations are absolutely crucial. When the temperature drops way below freezing, you have to actively fight the cold. You can't just sit there and take it. Now Roscoe, with his thick winter coat, he was honestly better equipped for the cold than I was. Still, I'd brought a small insulated pad for him to lie on inside the tent. He curled up right at my feet, a warm, breathing presence in the dark. Having him there, it was a huge comfort. The loneliness of that vast, cold wilderness felt a lot less daunting with my loyal friend beside me. I lay there in my sleeping bag, just listening to the fire hiss and pop outside. The tent fabric glowed faintly from the firelight, this fragile barrier between me and the immense, frozen world outside. The night was incredibly clear. Through the small vent in my tent, I could see what felt like 1 billion stars scattered across the black sky. They seemed brighter and closer out there, far away from city lights. It was beautiful, and honestly kind of humbling. For a while I felt this deep sense of peace. I was warm, safe, and just surrounded by pristine nature. That was the reward for all the effort. I closed my eyes, listening to Roscoe's steady breathing, and started to drift off to sleep, feeling content in my own little winter kingdom. But the forest, well, it wasn't as empty as I believed. The peace was shattered in an instant. Roscoe, who had been sleeping soundly at my feet, suddenly shot up. A low guttural growl rumbled deep in his chest. It was a sound I'd honestly never heard from him before. Every muscle in his body was tense, his ears pinned back, and the fur on his neck stood straight up. He was just staring intently at the dark wall of trees at the edge of the clearing, right beyond where the firelight reached. My heart, it jumped right into my throat. I sat up, my own senses, suddenly, on high alert. I strained my ears, listening for whatever had disturbed him. At first there was nothing, just the dying crackle of the fire. The silence of the forest had returned, but now, it felt menacing. Then, I heard it. A distinct crunch of snow. It was slow, deliberate. Someone was walking out there. The sound was heavy, not like an animal's step. My blood just ran cold. I was supposed to be completely alone. I hadn't seen any other tracks. No other cars. Who could possibly be out here, in the middle of nowhere, on a freezing winter night? The peaceful solitude I'd cherished just moments before was gone, replaced by this primal, chilling fear. I grabbed my brightest flashlight, my hand shaking just a little. I slowly unzipped the tent, just enough to poke my head out. Roscoe stayed right beside me, his growl now a steady, threatening rumble. I aimed the beam of light toward the trees where I'd heard the sound. The light cut through the darkness, lighting up the snow and the thick trunks of the pines. And then, I saw him. A tall figure, standing partially hidden behind a large tree. He was just standing there, watching the camp, dressed in dark, heavy winter clothing, his face totally obscured by shadows and a thick hood. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a drum. I shouted, "Who's there? What do you want?" My voice sounded weak and shaky in that vast silence. The figure didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, a dark, silent statue in the cold night. The sight of him was deeply unsettling. Why wouldn't he answer? Why was he just watching me? Roscoe's barking grew more frantic, more aggressive. He was trying to protect me, trying to scare the intruder away. I pulled my head back into the tent and zipped it shut, my mind racing with terrifying possibilities. I was no longer an adventurer. I was prey. The minutes that followed were, honestly, the longest of my life. My cozy tent didn't feel like a shelter anymore. It felt like a trap. The thin fabric walls offered no real protection. I was completely exposed. Every nerve in my body was just on fire with adrenaline and fear. I held the heavy flashlight in one hand and my camping axe in the other, my knuckles white. My weapons felt, well, laughably inadequate. Roscoe kept barking and growling, his body pressed against the side of the tent, facing the direction of the stranger. His fierce loyalty was the only thing keeping my panic from totally taking over. I kept shining the flashlight beam through the tent fabric toward the trees, but I couldn't see the figure anymore. Had he left? Or had he just moved, circling us in the darkness? Not knowing was its own special kind of torture. The silence returned, heavier and more threatening than before. I listened for another crunch of snow, for any sign of movement, but there was just nothing. The fire outside had probably died down to embers by then, plunging the clearing into near-total darkness. The cold seemed to seep into the tent now, a physical manifestation of my fear. I was alone, miles from any help, with a silent watcher in the woods. I tried to calm my breathing, tried to think logically. Maybe it was just another camper, but that didn't make any sense. Why would they stand there in silence? Why wouldn't they respond when I called out? The behavior wasn't normal, it was predatory. I thought about packing up and leaving right then, but the idea of fumbling with my gear in the dark, with that person possibly watching my every move, was terrifying. I felt safer, however falsely, inside the tent with my dog and my axe. We would wait until dawn. It felt like an eternity away. Then, the most terrifying thing happened. I heard a soft, scraping sound right outside the tent, just inches from my head. It was the sound of a boot dragging slowly through the snow. He hadn't left. He had crept closer, using the darkness as cover. He was right there. Roscoe went ballistic, lunging at the tent wall, barking with a ferocity that I knew was pure protective instinct. I yelled again, "Get away from my tent! I'm armed!" My voice cracked with fear. There was no response, just a heavy, terrifying silence on the other side of the canvas. I sat frozen, clutching my axe, waiting for the fabric to be torn open. The rest of the night was a sleepless, waking nightmare. I sat bolt upright, my axe in my lap, my eyes wide in the darkness. Roscoe never settled down. He stayed alert, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his ears twitching at every phantom sound the forest made. The stranger didn't make another sound near the tent, but his presence lingered like a ghost. I felt his eyes on me, even though I couldn't see a thing. The cold was secondary now to the chilling fear that had taken root in my soul. I faced challenges in the wild before, but this was different. This wasn't a test against nature, it was a confrontation with the unsettling darkness that can hide within humanity. As the first faint gray light of dawn began to filter through the trees, it honestly felt like a rescue. The oppressive darkness started to recede, and with it, a little sliver of my terror. I'd never been so relieved to see the sun. I peered out of the tent. The clearing was empty. There was no one there. But in the snow, I saw them. A single set of large boot prints. They came from the woods, circled my tent, and then led back into the trees in a different direction. Seeing that physical evidence made the horror of the night real. It wasn't just my imagination. He was here. He was watching me. I didn't waste a second. Adrenaline fueled my movements as I began to pack up camp with frantic speed. I threw everything into the back of the truck, not caring about organization. My only goal was to just get away from this place. Roscoe stayed glued to my side, constantly scanning the woods, still on high alert. The beautiful, peaceful forest, from the day before, now looked sinister. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every tree seemed to be watching me. The joy and peace I had felt were completely gone, replaced by this urgent need to escape to safety. Driving away, I didn't look back. I pushed the truck as fast as I dared on the snowy road, my eyes fixed on the path ahead. It wasn't until I reached the paved highway and saw other cars that I finally allowed myself to breathe. The relief was overwhelming, but it was mixed with a lasting sense of unease. That encounter changed me. It taught me that while solo camping can be empowering, it also exposes you to a unique and terrifying vulnerability. The wilderness is predictable. People are not. I learned that night that some fears are justified, and that the protective presence of a loyal dog is priceless. I will camp again, but I will never, ever camp alone.